Hi there, my name is Corey Decker. If you got this, that means chances are you got one of these. And if you did get one of these, open up the front flap, and I instructed each of your wives to put something in the front flap, specifically for you, because just a nice gesture. If you're not in that group, then that means this is mid-August, and I finally decided to get around to posting these. This is a men's study. Uh, it's three main parts, and these videos are just a pretty much overview of a study that I'm planning on only doing once, but if these get enough that I could take people aside and go and ask all the questions and do that. So, let's get started. First tenet is servant leadership. So, what does Starbucks, Marriott, Quick Trip, Aflac, and Chick-fil-A all have in common? So all sides of the different political spectrum. So what is it that unites them? Maybe you'd say that they're all famous companies, industry leaders. Well, what actually puts them all together is they all adopted a servant leadership culture and model that they now run things off of, which proves that servant leadership results in industry leading results. Uh, Take Chick-fil-A, for example. It was named America's favorite restaurant for 6 years straight, even though it's only open 6 days a week. And that's because when you go into Chick-fil-A, you can see the effects of the servant leadership that was given to them from the very top of the company all the way down to who's serving you. A case study is from a company called Darton World Communication. In 2004, Darton was for sale, and a man named Art Barter came in and bought it for about $10 million in 2004. And in a matter of 5 years, he changed it from a company that was worth 10 million to a company that's worth 200 million when he got done with it. Sure, maybe you can talk about, changes in industry, and you could talk about maybe possible different procedural things, but what he attributes that $190 million growth to is adopting a servant leadership culture within the organization. So what's the point in bringing up these businesses? They're businesses, and we're men. We don't have the power to change cultures, or maybe you do. We don't have the kind of power with equals out to $200 million. What's the point in bringing up the businesses? The point is that these businesses are shining examples of why servant leadership works. It breeds two things: engagement and success. So why is it that we won't adopt servant leadership in everything that we do? I'll look at where this particular concept came from. There's a writer in the late 60s, and I can't think of his name, who coined the term, but he originally got it from John chapter 13, verses specifically 12 to 15, but I'm going to read from 9 to 8 to 17 just to get the context. So this is biblical times. Feet washing was reserved for those at the very bottom end of the society. I mean, chances are these people didn't even have a name. So nowadays, just think of like Dodgers fans, Seahawks fans. Just kidding. They're not bottom feeders. But no, these people are at the very bottom of society. If it was the Civil War, this would be like the slave work. So now we go into our story. Simon exclaimed, "Then wash my hands and head as well, not just my feet." Jesus replied, "A person who has bathed all over does not need to wash except for the feet to be entirely clean. And you Disciples are clean, but not all of you, for Jesus knew who would betray him. Obviously, Judas was in the room. This is what he meant when he said, not all of you are clean. After washing their feet, he put on his robe again and sat down and asked, do you understand what I was doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, because that's what I am. And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. I have given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you. I tell you the truth. Slaves are not greater than their master, nor is the messenger more important than the one who sends the message. Now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them. So, if that's the case, how can we take servant leadership, this concept that's ballooned these companies to be industry leaders and everything? How do we actually use it down here? How does that happen? Well, we do it in our relationships. With our friendships, we can show servant leadership by taking care of our friends and listening to them first before you hear it from Fox, CNN, just anywhere else. We listen to what their needs are. And in marriage, it's ultra important to have the servant leadership mindset. You know, society tells us that we as men need to be, tough. We need to not cry. We need to be the breadwinners. We need to, woman's place is at home. That's what society tells us. So let's take a look at what the Bible actually has to say on that matter. And we'll go to Genesis chapter 2, verses 18 to 24. Also, apologize that this is blurry. Cheap camera is the only one that worked. Okay. Then the Lord God said, it is not good for man to be alone. Why we need to open up. I will make a helper who is just right for him. So the Lord God formed the ground, all the wild animals, and the birds of the sky. He brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And the man chose a name for each one. He gave names to all the livestock, all the birds of the sky, and all the wild animals. But still there was no helper just right for him. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. While the man slept, the Lord God took out one of the man's ribs and closed up the opening. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib, and he brought her to the man. At last, the man exclaimed, this one is bone from my bone and flesh from my flesh. She will be called woman because she was taken from man. This explains why a man leaves his father and mother and is joined to his wife, and the two are united into one. Now the man and his wife were both naked, but they felt no shame. Obviously, it means no clothes, but I choose to believe that it was also meaning that they were naked from any biases. They were naked completely. They saw into each other's soul. So, biblically, women are equal, and they should be treated as such. All these cool rules that society has about how to be a man and everything, it's led to a 50% divorce rate according to the CDC. 50%. That's a pretty big gamble. And, I know some people see that and they say, well, then, divorce is a part of life. What can you do about it? In reality, if you adopt that servant leadership model as a husband and you live to serve your wife, and you build that connection back and forth, and you learn about her, and you work in that relationship harder than anything else that you ever have in your life, you will have success. This is the end of Tenet 1. The next tenet will be men and vulnerability.